some international speakers who I'll try and keep to the tight time frame, but it's a real pleasure to introduce Paul Barber. He's a gentleman, a forest pathologist, an urban forester, the managing director of a very successful company, ArborCarbon, the director of innovation and technology for Arbor Flight, an adjunct professor at Murdoch University, supervised students all over the world. And ArborCarbon and Arbor Flight are really interesting companies that are really at the cutting edge of remote sensing. And I always enjoy these presentations to see how technology can really do things that we once thought were impossible. So it's really exciting to see this innovation, and welcome Paul Barber. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Just checking, is that working? Thanks very much, Peter. Always enthusiastic, and yeah, it's great to see you here and great to see everyone else here at the DIG meeting. It's been a few years since I've presented. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I stand on, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. Yeah, and it's my great pleasure to be here today to talk about the use of some technology, multispectral imagery, to monitor biosecurity risks and plant health in difficult ecosystems. So when we talk about difficult ecosystems, this would be one. We do a lot of work in the urban forest, and urban forests are quite complex. Obviously, a lot of different tree species, overseas trees, native trees, you know, understory landscapes, buildings. So yeah, we've done a lot of work in this space over the last, 10 or 12 years. So looking forward to speaking today about that application, or the application of that technology for biosecurity and tree health. So when we talk about biosecurity, we think about Australia. Traditionally, we've been very fortunate in that we're an island, and we continue to be an island, of course, but our trade increases. And as we can see, the green lines through there are the most common shipping routes, and the red lines others. But there's a huge amount of trade coming in. So, for example, somewhere like Melbourne might have 1.5 million shipping containers coming in per year. That's a massive amount of trade, and with that comes a massive risk in terms of the movement of pests and pathogens. That is the increased incursion risk, and with that, quarantine, although Australia is a world leader in quarantine, is incredibly successful in that space. You don't need to come in through the airport to see the dogs and New Zealand's the equivalent. It's not sufficient. Things do get through, and they will continue to get through over time. So we really need effective biosecurity monitoring and surveillance systems. This is really important to minimise the impact of these incursions and outbreaks, and I'm here to talk a bit about that today. These systems, they have to be efficient, timely and effective. It's really important. And with those increased incursions becomes a need for increased resources to do it well. The big problem, though, is that our government agencies are time and resource poor, and we've heard a bit about that today. So the amount of funding going to agencies to do this sort of work, it's just not enough. And so there's not enough people, there's not enough time, there's not enough money. Okay, and with that, that risk increases that these incursions will not be eradicated. So yeah, I'm here to talk about that today, and it is a big issue. So why forest biosecurity? So I'll talk a bit about forest biosecurity. Why? Because there continues to be a lot of incursions, and this is just a list of some of them over the years. So, things like pine aphid, fire ants, pine nematode coming into Melbourne. There's been some successful eradications over the years, but there's been others that have just got through and we haven't been able to eradicate. And so they're here to stay, and they have a massive impact. And beyond it as well, that talks about phytophthora, of course. Others have come through and they've been in the country for quite some time. So, things like sycamore lacebug, myrtle rust, they've been in the eastern states for a long time, 15, 20 years. We've known they were coming for a long time as well, but we haven't been able to stop them. And in WA, we're very fortunate. We are this sort of island within an island. We saw that during COVID, for good or bad. So we are this island, but continually we've known these things are coming, 10 years, we've been able to prepare, but we just don't have the resources, of course, and it's become apparent to try and stop some of these things from getting out. So polyphagous shotbolt borer is a real threat, and as is myrtle rust, and it has potential to have massive impacts going forward. You've all seen this graph, so a little bit, I had to include something about Phytophthora in here. I've spoken about Phytophthora previously, not so much today, but here's the great graph, Brazier. The number of detections and described species over time is just going up and up and up, and that will continue to happen as we get better at identifying them and we discover them, and they hybridise, of course, and they come in and move around. So forest biosecurity is not just the native forest, and it's not just plantations, but it's urban, it's the urban forest. Urban, plantation, native forests, they're really, the biosecurity of them is reliant upon these factors here. So we have these policies, they are very important. So they're set at the national and international levels and state levels as well, of course. We have supportive tree management, or we need supportive tree management agencies, okay? So that's really important, and we have those. Local governments have really good tree management people. State governments do too, but they just don't have the resources to map all the trees, and identify where they are and what's impacting them. So they have limited resources. We need vigilant staff in industries trained in pest identification. Now, that's no easy feat, okay? So firstly you need to start, and then you need to train them, okay? So we're really scrambling, I feel, to train these people, to even just get people to do it. And so this is a real challenge. We need an informed general public, and very interesting that polyphagous shotbolt borer has probably been here for years and years, so it's become apparent that that's probably been the case. But it was, someone from the public that identified or found it. It actually came initially, the email with the images was sent through to us, ArborCarbon. We were flat out, didn't have time to go out and have a look. We said, oh, we'll leave it until spring and go and have a look. And then, fortunately, they sent through to the app the images, and then BP jumped on that, and then we're away. So, the informed general public is very important to have them. And efficient and accurate monitoring and surveillance systems, and that's what I'll talk more about today, and that's really important. So they have to be accurate, they have to be efficient, timely, and effective. Okay, critical. So forest biosecurity may be achieved through systems that detect and prevent pest introduction. So that's obvious, and I think we're doing a reasonable job at that. But it's a massive border to have surveillance. So it's a huge task. We can't stop everything. So then we have to therefore be able to respond effectively if we're going to mitigate an outbreak if it occurs. Okay, and that's critical. So today we heard a bit about the sentinel plants or sentinel trees, the plant networks, and baseline monitoring and surveillance. These are really critical as an early warning system to detect exotic pests and pathogens. So that monitoring and surveillance of those sentinel trees, that is essential, and I'll talk a bit about that. Pre-border surveillance, I won't focus on that today. Post-border surveillance, I will. So early detection systems around high-risk sites. So high-risk sites are these approved arrangement sites. So these are these sort of approved sites where shipping containers come in through port, and then they go out to these sites and then they're opened there. Okay, and that's where there's been some pests, some very serious pests like Asian longhorn beetle. Opened up in a container, insects all over the container, close it up. Let's try and see where else it is and stop this thing. So these are really important sites for detection. New tree plantings in the urban area that are susceptible to these exotic pests. So we've seen this with Aces agundo, with polyphagous shotbolt borer. Okay, it's jumping into them. It's a really susceptible tree. They breed in that tree and they move out. There's many others as well, but those trees are early indicators. Urban tree databases used for risk modelling and targeted monitoring and surveillance. Now, we work with, maybe 50 or 60 local government agencies, maybe more around Australia. ranging from the city of Sydney and Melbourne to, you know, Sydney and Melbourne or local ones. And they all vary in the quality of their databases. Some have great databases. They might have, you know, 100,000 trees, all geotagged, know the species, know the attributes. Some may have 5. Okay, and that's we're reliant upon that. We're then reliant upon the communication of those local government agencies with state governments. Okay, so it's a real challenge. Okay, and it is a massive challenge going forward. And then regular and systematic monitoring and surveillance for key signs and symptoms through canopy change and tree decline. So how do we do that? You know, do we just send loads of people because we've got loads of people to go out and just look at trees and map canopy and tree decline? No, we don't, because we don't have those people. We can't do that. So we have to use other tools. And before I move into the remote sensing, I'll show you some examples. So here we have Japanese pine sawyer beetle, and we have the Asian longhorn beetle. Beautiful beetles, very destructive. You know, major risks to our industries. And so mapping the potential hosts of you know, host trees for those pests, that's a really important piece. And this work goes back, so City of Melbourne data, but David Smith and his dad Ian Smith, and David, who works in with us now within ArborCarbon based in Melbourne, you know, he did all this work over 10 years ago now, mapping the potential hosts of this pest. And if you look at the potential hosts of Japanese pine sawyer beetle, you know, they're just a fraction of the Asian longhorn beetle. Okay, so if the Asian longhorn beetle got through those AAs, then, you know, it can potentially be massive in terms of its impact. And it's had huge impacts overseas in the US and other parts of the world. So, and then if it gets out beyond the urban area into the forestry, horticulture, massive impacts again. And then think about carbon plantings and all the wave that's going on at the moment. So that's a whole other topic. So how should we monitor tree plant health threats? So currently the approach is mostly boots on the ground. Okay, so if something comes in, you know, we know it's coming, it's broken out. We try to employ lots of people to go out there on the ground and find those trees. It takes time, so it takes time to employ those people, it takes time to train them, it takes time to send them out huge sums of money, and it's you know, resource intensive. It's can be particularly slow. You know, it's not just the urban area, it's a more remote area. Getting people out to those remote areas as well takes time. There's logistics. Australia's a big country. Okay, it's not easy. So, you know, it's not particularly rapid. Resource intensive. We're resource poor. When I say we, you know, our government agencies are resource poor. Okay, they're not incredibly well funded. They don't have lots of people sitting there waiting to jump on incursions when they come out. Okay, so this is a big issue. And how effective and successful are those methods? Some have been very effective and successful, some haven't. Okay, so Myrtle Ross came in and then we weren't able to stop it. So it's you know, been in the eastern states now for over 10 years, and there's you know, numerous others. So more recently, that led to us undertaking a trial with the New South Wales government, so several departments over there. And I'll talk a bit about that today. So you hear a lot about AI. AI is a pretty big, broad term, sexy word. You know, a lot of things fall under AI, good and bad. But what we're talking about, you know, here is sort of remote sensing, machine and deep learning, another sexy term, deep learning, but a very powerful tool. And a targeted response, which could be, you know, a lower cost approach to you know, jumping on these incursions when they come in, more rapid, you know, targeting people to go to trees, less resources required, not as many boots needed on the ground to respond and try and eradicate, and could be more effective and successful. So I'll talk a bit about that. So we've developed this camera system we call the ArborCam years ago now, and the very first job we flew was the City of Melbourne in 2018. And from that, we've done lots of work now for local governments, you know, state governments throughout Australia, overseas, New Zealand, UK and other places, and all slightly different projects, many of them. But effectively what it is it's a camera system that is being developed for vegetation. So it's not a mapping camera system that you typically see with a near infrared band in there that's used for, say, an EVI or something else. It's designed specifically for measuring vegetation. Okay? And it's because it has a whole bunch of narrow multispectral bands across the visible, the red edge, and the near infrared. It has a thermal band, it has RGB. It's a combination of a whole range of bands. And we have drones, and we have UAVs, we have hyperspectral cameras. We've had amazing projects in New Zealand flying over Tani Mahuta with those cameras. But the reality is that if we're going to respond quickly and we're going to acquire data across large areas, we have to do it another way. And it's not with drones, particularly in cities. And it's not with satellite that lacks the resolution. So it's with the camera system, we adjust the height in terms of what we fly and how we acquire data. For example, we have the data. So this is a basic RGB image. I'm just using it as a layer and one of the outputs that we produced. We produced a whole lot more than that, which I'll show a bit more of. But we use all that data that we collect, the multispectral and thermal and the RGB and the height data and a whole lot of other stuff that we collect at the same time to identify things throughout the landscape. And this is what we use for canopy mapping. So, for example, New South Wales government's engaged to fly all of Greater Sydney, which is 33 councils, to map all their canopy, part of their Greening Sydney initiatives. You'd have to have, really accurate measures. But in this case, what we're looking for is something in the landscape. And what we're looking for here is trees that don't have leaves on, so potentially could be citrus trees, and trees that may have dead wood in the ground. So these are trees that we potentially could go straight to look at, rather than knocking on doors saying, have you got this tree? Or driving around looking for dead wood in crowds. Okay, so this is a remote sensing approach to then geolocate trees to go and look at and field validate. And so that came out of some work we did in Darwin about 4 years ago around citrus canker. And so that was a very early part of that work we did there, and then we've refined that over the years. But straight away you can see it's a very rapid method for identifying areas of interest in the landscape. We also ran a project with European house forest, so another pest, looking for dead wood in the landscape, so inspectors could go straight to the dead wood on the ground or in the trees. If we're going to benchmark condition of trees, and we're talking about, I suppose the title of my talk has tree health in there, which is a very big part of what we do. We need to acquire data in a specific manner that's true remote sensing. So again, a very different approach to mapping cameras. It's a very much a remote sensing approach with specific spectral bands and extracting data at the individual tree level. So to do that, you need to develop methods to delineate tree crowns. So this is where we've done this now for the city of Melbourne. It started with 1,500 elm trees to benchmark the condition of them about 4 years ago, and then it scaled to over 40,000 trees, and then sort of continued on from there. Again, this is another example, not just putting points on trees, but once you've delineated the tree crown, you can see there in those delineations there, that is each crown above 3 meters in height. Does that have to be a tree, it can be a shrub. But once you've delineated that, you effectively have a polygon for each tree. Okay, if you have that polygon for each tree, you can extract a huge amount of data from each tree. Okay. So that's, again, another key piece of this benchmarking tree condition. And so we had a local client ask us, they had polyphasic shot Arbora come into their plane trees. They were really concerned about monitoring the tree health. They asked us to fly drones over and monitor with their cameras. It's a very high profile area, really densely urbanised, quite wealthy suburb. And it wasn't going to be, viable to fly a drone over there. It just wasn't going to happen. So we said, look, what we'll do is we'll drop the plane down and we'll fly at low altitude, so 1,500 feet. We can effectively get 1.5 centimetre pixels from that. So equivalent to the UAV or drone, but we're scaling quickly. Okay, we can get the whole lot quite quickly. No one really knows we're there, and we're acquiring the data. So what you're seeing there is on the on the left-hand side. So we've got the 1.5 centimetre edge imagery. We've got the crowns delineated. The colours there are an index. They're not NDVI, so we don't. Most of you are probably aware of NDVI. It's the most commonly known index, which is used for measuring vegetation condition. We don't use it because it's not the best. It's got a whole lot of issues around oversaturation and other things. So we developed a range of other indices in those narrow bands, and this one we call the vegetation condition index. And so the colours in those pixels basically mean that the light's reflecting off the crown, and if the values in that index are higher, they're purple in the pixels, and if they're down in the red, they're lower, and it's a scale from low to high. But every pixel of reflectance has a value. Okay, so it's that light reflecting off that pixel. There's a 1.5 centimetre pixel there. It's a lot of information per crown. We don't need that resolution typically. We have a lot lower resolution than that. We might be flying at, say, 20,000 feet or 15,000 feet. It's a lot lower, but we can scale quite quickly. And so then you have the pixel values, and then what we can do, you can extract them at the tree level, and we end up with an average value at the tree level. And that's what you see here. So these numbers are the values per tree of the VCI. The polygon colours are scales, so in terms of the condition scale. And of course, you know, different species of trees can have different VCI values. Okay, so a ficus is going to be different to a eucalyptus, of course. If we know the species, we can benchmark the tree species across the area. If we don't, what we have now is a tool where we can fly over again the right conditions. We can monitor the changing condition of each tree quite quickly. And it's more of an objective, quantitative approach, less subjective and qualitative, which is traditionally the approach with boots on the ground. We won't replace boots on the ground. I'm not saying we'll replace them. It's a tool to work with boots on the ground. This was the original project from 2 or 3 years ago now in Sydney. So we were partly funded by New South Wales government departments, Plant Biosecurity, Forestry Corp, ourselves. So we ran this project. We fly big areas around Sydney. This is Sydney Airport, yeah. And so it's quite a challenging place to fly a plane, of course, but we have ways of overcoming that. So we acquire this data from this council area, working with the likes of Angus Carnegie, who I've known for a long time, State Forest. So he's one of the people that goes around and monitors sentinel trees. He coordinates that program and has done that for many years. And he said to me, look, you know, if you could tell us, you know, with greater than 75% accuracy, you know, where our pine and plane trees are, then we'd be happy, because you'd be directing us to them. We don't know where most of them are, and then we don't, you know, it takes us a long time to then go and look at them and extract the condition. So we flew ArborCam over there, applied the data. We worked with him on geolocating those trees using our imagery as a source of truth and a source of reference there. And then we're able to develop a model where we trained it to you know, identify plane and pine trees, and then we tested the accuracy of that model on the remaining data. And even some of those trees, we said, okay, you don't have data on where they are, so let's look at street view, and we're able to look and see where they're plane and pine trees, you know, in the landscape back into COVID. And so we're able to do that with pine trees at about 92% and plane trees at 95%. So it's really highly effective. And then that's then, you know, looking to scale as a tool going forward. But I must say, you know, some government agencies are probably more receptive to, you know, taking risks on a more innovative approach than maybe others. And then we had another project a couple of years ago in the UK through ArborFlight, who we have a shareholding in, and our camera system basically goes to the UK. It's mounted in other planes, acquires data, push that back to that gets pushed back to us, then we analyse it, report on it, and then provide management recommendations. And this was the national grid in the UK. So basically all their substations throughout the country, all right from London through to Scotland. So, again, rather than sending people out with drones and people looking at trees in the ground, they just don't have the resources, flying those substations and then looking for stressed trees. So these are hazards. So basically trees that are hazardous, dead wood in the ground that might fail onto the utility. Ash dieback, as it says there, will kill around 80% of ash trees across the UK at a cost of billions. The effects will be staggering. It will change the landscape forever and threaten many species which rely upon them. So it's really a massive issue. So early detection. So you can see, again, a couple of centimetre reds, true colour image, forest mostly looks pretty good, but the VCI, we can see where there's stressed trees, we can highlight them. Don't look at every tree, just go and look at these areas. Save your time, reduce resources, makes a whole lot of sense. So in summary, more incursions, sadly, it's depressing, I know, we're through all this bad news. It's the reality of it. They will occur. And due to increases in pressure from imports and trade, so we must be better prepared. That's just, we have to be. We need to overcome barriers. Okay, so some of these barriers to new adoption or adoption of new type of technology. Okay, there's lots of people in the tech space, ag tech's been one of the worst, AI, all the sexy words. A lot of people out there just trying to sell data or sell a product, and that puts people off. There's no doubt about that. It makes it harder for companies like ours. Risk averse, a lot of people are just adverse to risk and they don't like to take risks. Without risk, you don't innovate. So sadly, with technologies like this, you need to take some risk, but it's hard for some people to do it. Advocates of very old school ways of doing things, you get that everywhere, and that's another barrier to overcome. A lack of understanding, it's probably our job to help people understand the technology better as well, how it can be used, what it means. It's not that difficult. It's about sort of helping them. A lack of budget for such activities. So there might be millions and millions of dollars in budget to employ people, boots on the ground, but getting budget to put to these technologies, it doesn't exist. Okay, and again, it's about trying to get those funds or budget for these activities. These are realities in government agencies. And a disconnect between field personnel and data. So it's all good and well collecting the data and producing the images and the data, but making sure people can use it on the ground, easily, and collect other data on the ground to complement it. That's a real challenge, but I feel like, we've got pretty good at that. So better and more efficient data will enable effective response and detection to protect Australia's green assets, and that is the reality of it. Just a range of clients, some of this work we've done over the years, a bunch of local ones and interstate from a range of sectors, so they all sort of relate, all vegetation focused, and it's been very important in developing these tools. And I'm just the person up here speaking to you. There's a whole team of us, some in New South Wales, Victoria, mostly here in Perth, and they're awesome, really exciting, innovating all the time, finding that balance between doing R&D and actually delivering is always a challenge, but we love it. It's really cool.
So lucky you have people like Paul taking the risks to do new research. Just before you leave, do you have any questions? Sorry. Please.
Sounds like you look at can we cover in relation to and relate that to decline. Yeah. But could it be like you said, deciduous trees or natural senescence? And particularly in larger forest areas rather than urban environments. Doing any training between shrubs and trees and that sort of thing. And is it just the data that comes out in some sort of shape file format, veg polygons that have veg condition and location and other data?
There's lots in there. I'd say we should catch up again at some stage and go and show you all of that. So absolutely. So we say standard deliverables, height stratification of vegetation, which is the height classes. that's really the core of what we do for local governments, because they want to know about canopy cover and how it's changing, where to plant trees, how to grow them. Same thing in plantation companies. Tree counts, it's all very important as well. So, putting points on trees, and that helps to, determine planting spaces and what trees can, the growth of those trees over time. So we write a whole bunch of urban forest strategies as well. So around getting those measures real, rather than just saying I want 40% canopy cover, which has been traditionally what people have done. I think the spectral information you talked about, deciduous trees, senescence, it's a really good point. So yes, timing is critical. So things like jacarandas that lose their leaves, flower, become purple in October, November. Flying over them when they're all purple is going to give you a very different measure to when they're full green leaves. So that timing is really critical. So a lot of work we do for in urban forests for local governments is from sort of October through March period, southern part of Australia. And then we have some other projects where we try and do it before the leaves run, like you saw. So it's all about knowing what you're trying to achieve. Weed mapping, there's a whole lot of other things. So I suppose that's the difference. Like there might be a lot of companies out there that have cameras or tech. They're just trying to sell data, but they don't really understand the vegetation of the trees. It's really important, because otherwise you can spend a lot of money on the technology that doesn't achieve what you want. And this has happened for decades. And then people say it doesn't work. And that's happened time and time again. And it makes it hard when people like us come in and say, oh, we tried that, it doesn't work. We tried LiDAR, it doesn't work. So these are the barriers.
And the data to get at the end, it's not just you get the
no.
data.
Yeah. So that's a whole other side of it. So we've developed some tools, like web-based tools for our clients to log into, access the data, all different formats for us to vector, analyze it themselves really easily, so we don't have to do it all the time. Managers who don't have geospatial expertise, them being able to do it, have tools to do that. That's been really important, because we saw this disconnect in local government between geospatial and managers. And they just wanted to get a shapefile, through to us, and they can't open it and see it through. So we just changed all that, made it easy for them. It's really important. It's the engagement data. But yeah, let's have a chat, because I'll, probably blow your mind with some of that stuff. It's pretty cool.
Just one more question. So we better move on. And someone wrote a very enthusiastic question around. I'll summarise your ability to differentiate between the combined effect of Phytophthora and drought when you're assessing trees.
Oh yeah, okay.
Comments on that?
So differentiating between Phytophthora and drought.
Yeah.
And remote sensing.
Yes.
Yeah, really good question. I would say that, we've had projects over the years, like we did all the early stuff with City of June Block as part of their pathogen management plans, remote sensing, and going out and looking at all the sites and identifying Phytophthora. I'd say that we haven't nailed that, but that's probably partly because we haven't had the opportunity to really do it in detail, differentiating between drought and Phytophthora. Louise Cruiser, who Charles supervised and I co-supervised at the end, she did some really nice work using hyperspectral imagery, spectrometers, differentiating Phytophthora, waterlogging, things like that. So, I'd say it's possible, and I feel that we could do it.